finally. All right. Welcome to Full Circle. We're live. That's impressive, given the number of things that seem to have wanted to not behave themselves for me tonight. Just double checking a couple things. If anybody is in chat and notices anything at all strange about my cast, please immediately point it out, as I am I restarted a lot of things on my computer and I am trying to work through that. It looks like my frame rates are okay. It looks like YouTube's saying everything's okay, but if you notice anything, let me know so that I can take care of that. Okay, so I want to talk today. This will probably be a bit of a longer episode, unless some sort of additional technical glitch pops up, which I will not rule out at this point. But that notwithstanding, I'm hoping for this to be a little. This will probably be a little bit longer. Apologies for not getting a little bit more content out this week. I've been busy. My laptop's not been behaving. So, but here I am. We're going to talk two things. Really, they're both part of CID. One is the Crucible Guard, and I'm gonna go through that pretty quickly. I have the document open here, so feel free to follow along at home if you'd like. This is the first day of the release, so this stuff is certainly subject to change. I don't know how long they said this particular cycle will be lasting, but regardless of that, this is going to be the first releases. So things, don't assume like when Crucible Guard goes live that these are the rules or anything like that. If you're watching this video much later, this is literally first blush at that. The other thing I want to talk about, and I think we're going to actually transition to talking about that first, is in this CID cycle, but because it's very pertinent to Crucible Guard, there is currently a change/discussion going on about changing how elemental immunities work. There's actually quite a bit of discussion, but basically what they want to change, and as always, feel free to jump in with questions since we're on a live show. Basically what they want to change is, right now if you have immunity to, let's say, electricity, you will be immune, you will take no damage from any type of electrical damage. What they would like to change is that instead of taking no damage, you will the damage will have one less die on the damage roll. So this is actually the rule that's used in Crucible Guard, in Company of Iron, and they're proposing to change that to basically cover the entire game. And this is the biggest, probably one of the biggest changes that they've tried to introduce in a CID. I know in their video, they said that, or maybe it was in one of the posts, they said the dev team wasn't happy with where immunities are in the game right now, because they can sort of, I guess, randomly invalidate your ability to interact. I mean, it's not necessarily random, right? You may have purposely brought something immune to try to counter something that was dealing that damage, but I think they're talking about how it limits some list designs, and it makes it to where it's harder to consider playing certain like casters and lists, because if you say bring an army that's all fire typed, or let's say 60 to 70, 80% fire typed damage, and you randomly end up paired up against some army that's immune to fire everywhere, say Crucible Guard, you kind of have no outs in a lot of ways. Like, just tons of rules on your card are pretty invalid, and they didn't like that experience. So a similar situation was true for Company of Iron with a smaller scale. If you ran into, you know, if you brought your 20-point faction and, you know, there's a bunch of fire immune guys and you end up facing like Fire Eaters and Northkin Raiders, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. And sometimes the mirror match, right? So like Signars sometimes has that with lightning, Protectorate with fire, a few factions with fire, Corrosion, you know, sometimes Crix mirror matches, things like that. That's sort of their reasoning for wanting to change the rule to work like this. It's basically to still give you an advantage, but not make that advantage such a either you have the answer or you do not type situation. They want it to, they're basically introducing more, or they're potentially introducing more counterplay to it. And then there's a few other things, so just to make sure I'm explaining it totally correctly, those things will change. The other changes won't, or the other things that immunities provide won't be changing. So, for example, if you have immunity to corrosion, you will still be immune to the corrosion continuous effect. Same for fire. For electricity, if there's a lightning arc, it still won't arc to that to a model with that immunity. And there's some other changes too, like so. By the rules of this, Scather, for example, before just said it was the type of damage that it was because it would be ignored. Now it'll say things like the models without immunity to corrosion that enter it, or things that do fire, things like that. They're going to add some qualifiers to some of these effects that exist out there, so that they still work as intended, basically. So overall, I'm not sure how I think the pros and cons of this shakes out. It's actually a very significant change. It definitely means that there's some stuff in Circle where, mostly in Circle, it's kind of both good and bad. I suppose it's mostly neutral. So, like the Celestial Fulcrum, for example, is immune to cold, fire, and electricity. So before, you would use that sometimes as sort of like a shield against damage of that type, depending on the list, by, you know, like hiding behind it with your caster or something if you knew that a certain type of damage was out there. On the other side of it, though, it also could suffer from, you know, it has all three of those damage types on its rules, and it now isn't totally invalidated against that so now the Fulcrum, where before you're like, oh, well, my cold spray doesn't do anything because you're immune to cold. You're like, well, my cold spray might do something now. Or your, you know, the fire, you know, frequently you could run into a case where one of those damage types was invalidated. We have a decent amount of lightning damage. We've got the Wold White now that has fire, well, it's continuous effect, so not a huge change there. We have a couple sources of cold damage, and yeah, mostly it's lightning after that. So this is going to affect our ability to deal damage out. And then we do have models that have immunities. So Kruger 2 was pretty commonly a big middle finger to Signar, especially Nemo 3, with immunity to electricity for his whole army. So now it's sort of debatable, like, where that stands. Like, is that enough now that Kruger is still enough of a good drop into Nemo? You're still going to stop the leaps from jumping around. So, although that'll mean you want to be very careful about what minions you bring in your army. But, so it'll stop that. But will it be enough, you know, now that he's still doing 2 dice of damage with all those range shots on his feet turn? Is that enough to protect you from something like that? It does mean that he's not, like, well, for one thing, the thing stops leaps anyways. But in any other list, Nemo players are going to have to really think about some of those cases where they would actually like shoot their own Firefly to try to leap into your stuff. Like that's going to hurt now. So this is a very neutral change. It's a very high impact change. In Circle, the other things that are affected, Druids of Orboros, because they can get immunities to all the elements, and that basically would keep them safe from a ton of stuff. I'm now not so sure how that's going to play out because at only armor 13, it's potentially going to be kind of problematic. There's no way for sure to know that this is going to be the final form this rule takes. I know that one of the developers did mention concern that some single wound troopers, their elemental immunities are going to be incredibly difficult to be very meaningful in some cases. So like Druids are a great example. They're armor 13, right? And right now it doesn't really matter what the POW is of something that you drop on them. If it's an elemental type, they're going to be immune to it. But now if they end up getting hit with blast damage that's like a POW 10 or something like that, like before they would have stayed, or even just a direct shot that's a POW 10 like fire type, before they would have lived through that. Now even with one die, it's a 50-50 that they die, and if anything is giving any additional damage out there, they're pretty likely to die. So is that gonna be enough? Apparently there's been some conversation where there's maybe been a little bit of talk that maybe instead like it'll be like the a change to the armor value or something like that. It sounds like there will be at minimum something changing with how elementals immunities work that does not just provide you with total immunity. This is early. We will see. Ultimately, I think it's probably best for the game, but I do think it could be a bit of a rocky change to adjust to. I think some things. I think it'll stay neutral for like over 50%, like 60+% of the game. I think the trade-off will be basically just very neutral. And then I do think that we're gonna start seeing like some of the consequences of it will fall out kind of slowly, right? Like my Druids example, if they go with the change being exactly this, are they going to be surviving at the rate that we want them to be? Or, is the elemental immunities on the Earthborn still good enough? I think they probably are, especially in Trolls, because it's like armor 18, -1 die, like, not really doing much there. Things like that, right? Like, are casters immune enough? Effects like Kruger's Sheltering Hand, is it now enough? Things like that. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I think that's a change everyone who plays the game should be keeping their eye on. It's very pertinent as Crucible Guard has tons and tons of elemental damage as well as elemental immunities. I think if this doesn't go in, this isn't going to be such an issue for Circle because most of their stuff's immune to corrosion and fire. But it's very likely to be backbreaking for some factions if those immunities are not somehow don't somehow make interaction. Plus, the Crucible Guard mirror match was something they talked about specifically in their video. So that's kind of the first thing. I don't think I saw any questions. There's a comment about Menoth. I'm very interested to see where this change goes. I don't really have a ton of I haven't really thought super in depth about it. It's like I said, it's sort of a either or for us. I know Nemo 3 is one of the big question marks for this change that folks are trying to work through because he's already kind of one of those oppressive feeling matchups for a lot of people, and Circle was just like, well, here's my Kruger 2, and you never saw Nemo 3 again, and now you're like, well, wait a minute, do I have to start dealing with this again? I feel like probably not, but it'll need some testing. So that's that change. And next, what I want to do is we're going to go through this. I'm going to do my best to go through this kind of as quickly as I can, because I watched most of the dev talk on this, and they took like 2 hours to go through all of this material. So I don't really want to take 2 hours to go through all this material, even though I probably could, just because there's so much of it. So I'm going to go through their PDF. Actually, first I'm going to talk. Do I want to talk about their themes first? No, we're going to go through the PDF first. This has everything that's changed for them. They do pick up some some mercenaries that already exist. They'll be getting errated to say they play for Crucible Guard. We're not going to really go into that too much, at least not in this. And we're just going to I'm going to go through. I haven't read this in depth as much as I would have liked, so you're going to get some of my first impressions here as well. And yeah, so we'll sort of talk about like things that we maybe should be considering from the circle perspective as I go through. That's kind of my intent anyways, and so we will I'll do my best. So first up is the Vanguard. I'm not reading through stats here. I'm only going to talk about things that are relevant as I see them. Basically, the Vanguard has no change. We'll probably it is considered a faction model for them. That's important, I suppose. We will come back around and we'll probably talk about this if I get a chance to brush up on their themes. Gorman is just being changed to become partisan, and his rats going up to 6. Important change here. We will talk about this. I talked about it, I think, back a little bit, maybe. But the effect Rust is now changing so that all constructs suffer -2 armor rather than just Warjacks. So this is important. You're going to need to pay attention if you're playing Bones of Ouroboros or a Wold Heavy list of any variety. Aside from that, Secret Masters or Wild Hunt probably, or non-theme, I suppose. That Rust now will reduce the armor for Wolds by 2, the Fulcrum, the Wold Wrath, Shifting Stones, Sentry Stones. Any of our constructs now can be debuffed with Rust, and before they could not. So you need to pay attention to where those type of effects are and what can be leveraged against you. So that's just something to be keeping in mind there. Okay, so that's Gorman. Hutchuk just gains Partisan. Same concerns there, obviously, with the Rust. All right, and then we get into their first caster. I will do my best. I think it's Arum is how you say that word. Arum Legate Lucas de More. He's kind of got a crazy sort of like... he has juice boxes, and he can check them off to gain focus, basically, and his feet sort of interacts with that too. He's got a very like up and down game plan, so look for this guy to have like 1 or 2 really big turns, and he's going to be a little bit more spellcasty. They do have arc nodes. We'll talk about that when we get to them. Apparently in testing he had telekinesis at one point, and they were like, nope. So that's sort of his, he's doing a lot of like mental stuff. So he has a gun, he's got a melee weapon. Stat line wise, he's pretty blah. Mat 7, Rat 6, defense 15, armor 16. He's got he always has a 12-inch control area, even though he's focus 5, because it oscillates. He's got 60 damage. He's got Burning Ash, Disintegration, which is a new spell. This is one I'd love to see in Circle. It'll probably never happen. So that's something to watch out for. It's a model hit. It's a 3-cost range 10, power 13. Model hit suffers -2 armor for a round, and if the model's boxed by that spell, they're removed from play. Otherwise, Force Hammer, Iron Flash, Mirage, Burning Ash. So he does have the ability to set up a pretty significant cloud wall if he wants. So watch for that. Mirage, obviously some threat range extension here. But all in all, I would say he's going to get some use out of his feet, which gives him, again, the ability to get focus. He could spend roughly 17 focus in a turn, I believe, depending on how he plays it. So watch for that. Rapid healing, so he's going to be a little bit tankier against the small damage output. So yeah, nothing in particular here as Circle that I think frightens me. Watch out for Force Hammer. Disintegration is going to be a good spell, obviously, to do damage to us. that's a situation where it would be nice if we had some ways to stop spells like that, because that's not an upkeep. So we'll see on that. Aurum Adeptus Silvestro. I think this one's Super Gorman. Yeah. I think. It doesn't matter. Anyways, his feat is basically a really good Signs of Portents, in the sense of you get to choose the die. It's not just the best die, or sorry, the worst die that you get rid of. So there's a lot of crit effects if you see him that you're going to want to worry about. He's immune to fire and corrosion. He's got an alchemical mask, so he ignores clouds. He has this super stealth ability. It literally reads exactly like stealth, but it's not called stealth, so you can't use anti-stealth things against it, which is a bit frustrating. But it is a cloud. He does have to be in a cloud effect to make it work. So a couple of our options that can get rid of clouds are going to be strong against this caster, because they're probably not really planning for that. So that includes Linus and Andrea, Kruger 1, Grail, and no, that's it. And obviously the Misspeaker just actually, no, that does not help. Eyeless Sight will not help in this case. So those models I just listed become pretty good. He also can cast a free spell instead, or speed up his Warjack. So he's a pretty flexible caster. Admonition, Explosivo, Purification, so that's definitely one to be watching out for. Another place where that spell is showing up in the game is certainly something you want to be concerned with. While Morvana 1 no longer is so concerned with this, a caster like Balder or Chromac 1 is definitely going to not love playing into that. Revive, which also works with the second part of the feat that I forgot to mention. He can remove... anytime an enemy model is destroyed in his control range, a friendly faction model can remove D3. So if he revives something and removes D3, you may see him with the medium-based infantry. Stygian Abyss, that's on the Witch Coven. Same thing. So blind again, potentially leverage. If with his feet, he could probably crit with that. So watch out with your fulcrums, being they can't shake blind. So. And Transmutation, which is +2 strength, defense, and Pathfinder if it's on a friendly, and it's an enemy spell that is -2 strength, defense, and loses Pathfinder on enemy model units. So that's another spell. We're pretty used to having Pathfinder and everything, so that's definitely a spell to watch out for him arcing on us. It's range 8. Yeah, so you're going to want to. And he has 3 upkeeps here, so Purification is certainly not at no cost. But look out for that. Double checking where we are. No questions yet. That is fine. Probably because nobody's watching. Marshal General Baldwin Gearhart, Mr. Clog. Mr. Clog is his gun caddy. He gets a different gun from him every turn. It's pretty cool. His feat is basically cyclable prey. He chooses it when he feats, and then it cycles around, but it only lasts for a turn. Kind of like the once it's started, it's just like the Heretics Trump Arcana, but he gets to choose what it's on, and that is immensely different. So don't think this is a lame feat by any means. Like adding prey is a pretty big deal. He is veteran leader for faction warrior models, so you're gonna probably see this guy with more infantry. He's bringing Boundless Charge, Deceleration, Hot Shot, and Molten Metal. Molten Metal is probably situational. Deceleration is very good in general. Boundless Charge is very good. Hot Shot's very good, and his guns are all over the place. He has an acid cannon that has arcing fire. He's got a gun that does momentum. He's got a gun that does crit stationary with cold. He's got a Shadowbind gun, not crit, just Shadowbind. So all things to watch out for. You're going to want to, if you can sort of negate his ranged attacks, I think that's going to be what you're looking for here. Let's see. Aurum Lacanum Athenor Locke. We'll just call him Locke from now on. So he actually plays for Convergence also. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this one. His feat also removes upkeep spells and animi, so again, something else to watch. And when a model is forced to cast a spell or spends a focus or fury in his control range, he gains a focus and can immediately cast one spell. So it's sort of a split between Asphyxious 3 and Minion Warlock. I'm blanking on Caliban in how he works. So watch out there. He's Matt and Rat 5. I'm sorry, or is it she? She. I think the model is a she. The name does not really tell, but I'm pretty sure I looked at the picture and it's a lady. Matt 5, Rat 5. So when you're talking about vectors later on, that's going to be a big deal. She is definitely a Warjack caster. She's resourceful. She has the rule they added to Morvana 1 called Vital Magic, so her upkeeps aren't probably getting purified away. She has Precision Strike, so you can choose a column or branch. Has a repair special action. Most importantly, in the Convergence matchup, she's bringing Engine of Destruction, barring any changes, and that is a doozy because she goes up to Mat 9 with that, and that does change her mat. So the vectors will also be adjusted accordingly, and it's very, very powerful. She's going to get Warjacks moving pretty quick. She's got Redline, Road to War. Sentry gives a model the ability to make a basic attack during the maintenance phase, and there are a lot of potent ranged attacks in this army. Jackhammer, which with her feet is going to be very potentially scary when she's, when you're trying to attack something with your War Beast and she's just like jackhammering back at you with a Mat 9 vector. You're going to want to watch out for that. So a little concern here. I'll be a little surprised if she makes it through with this exact spell list, so that's okay. Captain McKay. She's in a battle engine and has 36 damage boxes. I doubt you will ever see this caster played without two more Rayless Interceptors in the list. She provides oil to things, and there's a lot of fire damage rolls potentially in this, so look for a lot of accurate firepower out of her. Running gun for the feet and boosted damage is going to be a pretty big deal for her. Just double checking chat. Don't see anything. Just as a quick heads up, if you hear anything weird, it's because Griffin's Roost Painting might be doing some priming and other hobby related activities. So if any of that gets over to the microphone, apologies. But Adepticon is a coming. Jumpstart. So don't try to TK models with her. Sorry, Warjack specifically. Mobility. Turn fire, failsafe. Her spell list is only okay. Mobility is very good. The rest is just okay, like not lighting the world on fire. But she does make the Rayless Interceptors better. Her feat is what is it? Construct? Construct models gain the boosted damage. So there's some interesting things that are going to be there. So then we get to the First Light Warjack, the Retaliator. So these are all built on top of the Vanguard chassis, basically. This one in particular has a gun, and that gun has a bunch of abilities. One will remove clouds, so be aware of that. We have a lot of stuff that creates clouds. We have one that does grievous wounds, so again, be on top of that. One that does fire. It's immune to corrosion and fire. A lot of stuff in this faction is immune to corrosion and fire. Otherwise, nothing too special there. The Liberator is the one you'll want to pay attention to. If you see that one, it specifically is an arc node until its arc node damage boxes go out, which can happen anytime a spell is channeled through. Roll a d6 on a 1 or 2. It suffers a damage point to whatever its first available arc node is. It has 2 arc node boxes, so and it is a 10-point jack, so there's some casters that are definitely gonna want to have an arc node, but there's only a guarantee that you get to channel 2 spells from a single arc node. So that's gonna be a little bit tough, but otherwise it's still more or less a Vanguard without a shield. Sorry, no, it does have a shield. Still immune to the things I mentioned. We're just going to cruise around. The Toro, the favored jack of Rutger Shaw. His is named Rex. This one's just a regular Toro, though. Basically, important to note, these can play for Mercs, so we might see them there. The 13 points, pretty much just a beater jack. It's a POW 13 with a shield, range 2, POW 18 sword, speed 5, defense 11, armor 18, mat 6, rat 5, rat doesn't matter. It has countercharge. 30 boxes. That's it. Obviously, just pay attention to countercharge since that can be a pretty big deal. I think with some of the other interactions these casters have, it could be even more of a big deal, but watch out for that. The Vindicator, I think this one is the mainly... this one's sort of the what do I want to say? Combined Arms Jack. Again, same immunity, same grid as I just mentioned. It's got a 2-inch POW 17 attack, and then it has a POW 14 range 10 POW 14 AOE 4, and then it has a damage type that does additional as Weapon Master against Construct and Undead. It has one that will make War Beasts gain a Fury point unless they ignore gas effects, and one that's damage type magical. And if it aims, it gets +4 range, so it's kind of like the, what's that called? The other Merc Jack, not thinking of. 15 points, nothing too special here. Watch out for the gun. Be careful with your living War Beasts around it. Be careful if you're dropping constructs against it, since a POW 14 Weapon Master gun is significantly better. The Suppressor was out there before, so this is sort of the utility jack. It's a 13-pointer. Same chassis. It has dual attack, so it can make. It has 2 6-inch sprays and 2 open fists. The fists are POW 14, and then the effects are Rust, Incendiary, so it's just a fire type, continuous fire attack, and Ice Cage. So since this can boost, like being able to put ice cages on stuff, I think this jack is going to look bad to people, but expect to see it. And as Circle, we definitely want to be watching out for those ice cages, since we rely on defense quite frequently, or the Rust if we're relying on our wolds. So I think this jack is going to be one you're going to want to pay attention to where it can actually get, and since it can charge and spray, potentially it can actually dig pretty deep. They very creatively named the regular trooper models in the faction. The unit is named Crucible Guard Infantry. Pretty obvious what they are. These guys are pretty basic. They got a range 12 POW 11 ridiculously named gun that basically can do either magic damage, fire damage with crit continuous, or corrosion with crit continuous. And then they have a POW 9 sword. They're pretty. I mean, they're not priced as super cheap guys. Oh, they have CRA, so they're fine. We can kill their defense 12, armor 13, speed 6. If you're playing Circle, they are immune to corrosion and fire again, but we have plenty of axes and spears that will kill them just fine, as well as non-typed damage spells. Their officer brings the mini feet wide of their eyes, which is additional die on ranged attack rolls if the model's within 8 inches, and reposition 3, so that's fine. Again, I don't think, you know, it's a unit with a range 12 POW 11 gun and pretty crappy melee abilities, but pretty easy to kill. So just be aware of their range. The Stormtroopers, I'm going to tweet this to Will Pagani and Will Hungerford after this podcast, or after this video. But I don't understand how something named Stormtrooper doesn't have the inaccurate rule. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, please watch a Star Wars movie and watch the rest of this video. That said, these are sort of in the vein of like the Man-O-War Bombardiers. They only have 5 boxes and stuff. They're 11/16. They do have Carapace, so that's sort of their additional armor. Both the medium-based infantry have that. But then they have range 12 POW 14 guns with arcing fire. They have high explosive 10, And they also have a rule where if they aim, they get +4 range. So these guys are going to be pretty potent, but if you do get in their face in melee, you're going to take them down. Armor 16 with 5 wounds, and pretty low defense is not going to do too much. Their point costed fairly. They're FA3. They're pretty good for medium base infantry. Carapace goes a long ways, though they do have tough, just to keep in mind. Carapace is going to go a long way. So armor 20 against most guns is not where you want to be when you need to do 5 damage, so you're going to want to be looking to deal with them in melee. I don't know why the other medium base infantry is not next, but I'm just going to keep going down the document, so if you're following along, you can. The rocket men are next. These guys are fast. They have... oh, and mind you, as I'm going through here, I'm going very quickly, so it's entirely possible I've missed something critical in this, so just keep that in mind. They're speed 7, they're rat 6, their mat doesn't matter because they have gunfighter and they only have guns. Defense 14, armor 11. They have flight, hence rocket man. And then they have 2 different types of attacks. They've got a regular like carbine, which is range 10, POW 10. And then they have a gravity bomb, which is range 4, AoE 3, POW 12. The attack ignores cover and elevation, but flying models don't suffer blast damage. And it's cumbersome, so they have to pick which of those 2 guns they're going to shoot with. But having access, and you'll see why, like with the speed they are, having access to stuff like that's going to be really good for them. And there's a lot of debuffs in this faction. So there's that. And then the attachment, which is the most important, which is the most relevant part of this, is he has a mini feat that gives him +2 speed and defense. So now those gravity bombs I just mentioned that are only 4-inch range actually threaten something like and they're gunfighters, so they can charge and do it. So they're threatening, well, if they're range 4, then they're not really getting any range. So they go 9 and go another 4, so it's 13 inches, which is not super far, but then their defense 16, and they have reposition 3 from them. Like, these models are going to move much faster than you're going to expect. They don't have AD. No, they don't have AD. So watch out for that. Speed 9 flying models are something you want to know where they are on the table. And they also, I don't know where it is, but they have a weapon attachment that has a POW 14 slug gun, basically, that they can be added for 2 points. So this unit can do some pretty considerable work with the debuffs this faction can bring. Mechanics, they're mechanics. I got nothing. They have a melee weapon that's a fire type, so that's the first thing. It's a torch. They'll hit you with a torch. But they can put Pathfinder on things, like the mechanics in Convergence. They have a repair. They're pretty cheap. I think you'll see them. I wouldn't worry too much overly about them. Combat Alchemists. So these guys are one of the bread and butter units. They're FA3. It's a 3-man unit. They have Prowl and Smoke Bombs, so they have the ability to basically act like the Druids, except their clouds stay in play for a turn or round, which I wish the Druid clouds did as well, but that's okay. Then they have range 6, POW 12 grenades, and those do an acid. Models hit to suffer continuous corrosion. They have Blood of Urkane, which is a magic grenade, and then if you crit, upkeeps and expires, so be wary of that. And Ice Cage, which does not require a direct hit, so they have a way to reduce your defense without directly hitting you. You're going to want to know where that effect is, of course, too. Dr. Adolphus Morley. This one is one where I probably need to give him some more work. Or more looks at, but he's a ranking officer, so if they bring mercs, you can attach this guy. He's got some different things to make him immune to corrosion, and put continuous corrosion out there. They can become tough and immune to knockdown, but then they suffer -1 to attack rolls. They can get +2 strength and overtake. He can heal. He has a mini feat that does 4+ tough, it looks like. So watch out for his you know, watch out for whatever the mercs he brings can do. They have a solo that is a 4-point solo that's FA4 called a Trancer. These guys have the +2 defense against range and no blast, so you want to know that. Mental Force, which means they can boost, and their magic, they suffer damage if they do that. Their magic ability, oh, I guess it doesn't matter. It says that, I thought that had to be magic ability, but it's any attack. So before it makes an attack, all attacking damage rolls are boosted. And then it has a range 2 POW 14 smite force blow, so they're attacking you in melee with their brains. And if you kill them, they blow up. So just keep an eye there. They have AD, so they're going to be an interesting, like, one of those models that's an interesting puzzle to unwrap. Prospero, this guy is ridiculous. He has veteran leader Warjack, so keep that in mind. He has guided fire, so now those guns are going to be pretty accurate that are on him. He's a lesser warlock, or nope, the other thing. Journeyman Warcaster. He has Dispel, which it puts on the melee weapons of models in his battle group. And then he also has this crazy spell called Instability Equation, where target friendly Warjack stands up if it was knocked down, is no longer stationary, can turn to face any direction. If it was disrupted, it is no longer disrupted. It gets 3 focus and the unstable rule, which is the rule on the Berserker chassis in Khador, which says that at the end of an activation which a model spent more than 1 focus point, roll a d6. If the roll is equal to or less than the number of focus points spent, the model explodes and other models within 3 inches suffer an unboostable POW 14. So, this guy's crazy. He's also a construct, so look out with him, for him with like McKay, because he's going to do a bunch of extra damage. He's got a gun, it's range 10, POW 12, so you start getting boosted attack rolls, boosted damage. It don't hurt. Again, you know, but what, you know, we can kill Warjacks. Watch out for the Dispel here. Watch out for giving a place where if you do get the instability, where it blows up, things like that. The Rayless Interceptor. This thing has speed 6 and it has a bunch of guns. I think you're going to see it with McKay, where it's going to get boosted damage for a turn and put on a lot of damage. This is going to be one of those things that really stresses the elemental immunities that I talked about. So you're going to want to be aware of that. I don't think there's... they're armor 19 with 36 boxes, so I put them in the pretty killable by a heavy war beast category. They don't really have any special defense other than that. They do reposition 3. I think they're just good. I don't think there's something we should be too concerned with. And then we have Alice Mark. So this is 2 types of solo. She sort of does a Jekyll and Hyde thing. When she's Hyde. Jekyll. She has magic ability, which gives her, like, she's more supporty. She has harmonious exaltation. She has guidance, so the Alice Sight ability. She has empower, which we know from everything else. Then once per game, or when she takes damage that would kill her, she turns into a big scary lizard thing, where she has countercharge and jump and hyper regeneration and Mat 8, POW 14 with 2 attacks. I think she's gonna be pretty cool. How many points is she? 5 points. I think she's gonna be a pretty interesting piece. You're just gonna want to watch for how the damage works, and she sort of works like the opposite of a Dragoon, where normally they die and fall off and go from big to small. She's going from small to big. So, oh, there's the Rocketman Gunner. I have no idea why it's here, but they do what I said. There's Ace. He's a solo Rocketman. He has dodge. He has leadership to give them dodge, so they're high defense already, so you can see why that would be tricky. And then he has the carbine and the gravity bomb without cumbersome, so he can do that. Let's see, assault troopers. These are the ones I mentioned. So these are the melee guys, and these are one of the few melee options. I kind of talked about that. Nothing too super scary here. Brutal charge, they're getting POW 15, Mat 7 POW 15. So watch out for that. Flame burst, fine. Carapace means don't try to kill them at range too much. Ashen Veil is always a good effect. And the Dragon's Breath rocket. Important here is the effect it applies is Withering Humor, which is -2 armor, and you lose tough unless you ignore gas effects for living and undead. So watch out for this to determine like what you're worried about being debuffed, armor debuffed. And then they have, I think this is the last entry. Yes, they have a Colossal named Vulcan, and this guy's pretty nuts. He has some range. He does like a like the Blightbringer, where 5 inches around him he has an effect that he chooses every turn, which can be Rust, or losing tough and no healing, or immunity to elements, losing immunity to elements rather. And then he has a rule where he has a range 14 AoE 4 POW 14 gun, and much like the Blightbringer, he will apply whatever vent he's currently using in that area, and it's reload 1, so you can shoot twice. You can only make attacks with that weapon during its combat action, so that's for some of the out of activation shots they're a little worried about the power of. He's got 2 smaller guns too. This guy's kind of beastly. You turn off those special effects if the super systems are crippled. And the things that are kind of crazy about it is actually it's speed 6, mat 6, and rat 6. So the 37 points. So like if this is kind of the face of where Colossals may be headed, we should take notice, because those are some pretty considerable stats. Okay. I just went through a whole faction real quick. For those of you who followed this far, hopefully there was a little bit of value there, a little bit to whet your appetite. Obviously go through and read some of these things for yourself. I didn't go through the theme forces. At this point I probably won't, because I just went through a ton of information there without like breathing, it feels like. So I'm not, even though I'm live, I did not really see a lot of questions, so that's fine. I think I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up the episode though, unless I see a question pop up real quick. However, you can always feel free to ask me questions on the video, on Twitter, in the Full Circle Facebook group, in the Full Circle Discord. Oh, I may have a question there actually. Nope, lies. There was a message, but it wasn't a question about this. So yeah, feel free to hit me up with questions in any of those through any of those mediums, and I'll try to do my best to talk about it. We will certainly be discussing Crucible Guard as more develops out of that. We'll definitely be talking about the elemental immunities as more develops from that as well. I don't really know when that will be introduced exactly, if it does get introduced, since it's you know, it affects more than just this thing. So anyways, as always, if you like my content, hit the subscribe button, share it on social media. If you want to be part of the conversation, I just gave you a bunch of different ways of doing that as well. I am hoping to, this week is probably going to end up being a little bit light on content. Apologies there. I may try to get another video out maybe Friday. And if not, hopefully I'll find some time over the weekend to do a little bit of recording. Or maybe Friday I'll spend some time recording, so that next week will be a little bit more full circle-y for you. So anyways, as always, I thank you for watching. Hopefully it was informative, and we'll catch you next time.